Hello and welcome to Ancient Awakening.
Hi, me editing here, and I didn't introduce myself at all in this video. I am Kastalia, so it's Ancient Awakening with Kastalia. I am the Elfian Realm communicator and channeler over at the Realm of Inspiration. I am a certified Crystal Reiki master and channeler and certified card reader, and I have my website, elfianrealm.com, where I do all of my things. I do spiritual coaching and lots of other things, and I'm also certified in ancient Greek myth and ancient Greek gods and goddesses as well. So I have the qualifications to be talking about Greek mythology and about the metaphors within the myths. So that is me. And if you want to meet me, get to know me a little bit more, in the description of this video, I have all of my social media, so you can check me out. I also sometimes do photography and I write articles on a platform called Medium. So check me out and all these other things. But I completely forgot to introduce myself. So hi, here I am, and I will be the host of this show.
A new video podcast where we dive into the spiritual symbolism within mythologies. Specifically, ancient Greek mythology is where we are starting because there is a lot of spiritual metaphors there. The Greek mythology was like my bedtime stories. It is, I've been always very fascinated by it, and I have always felt like there is deep spiritual metaphors hidden within them. So I have my all my long notes for this first episode, which is generational cycles. So this video podcast, which we'll see if I can turn it into like audio and also maybe put it on Spotify at some point. I really don't know. But I just wanted to create a separate channel from the Realm of Inspiration, which you can go and check out as well, as you probably came to this video from the Realm of Inspiration, but if you found it on your own, welcome. I wanted to create something different than just doing readings for the collective and actually dive into some messages that are hidden in stories that we already know. Because there was a period of time where messages were coming through metaphorically. So there's a lot of metaphors, and as Ancient Awakening, I'm going to touch on Greek mythology, also ancient Greek history, probably going to dive into some metaphors within plays, obviously the Iliads and the Odyssey and all of those things as well. What can be found as spiritual metaphors there, and then maybe branch out into other cultures in the future when I go in and I study them. So let's get started in talking about what this episode is going to cover, which is generational cycles within the Greek myths. And it specifically comes into play when it comes to the shifts in power dynamics and quite a few other things. There are a lot of different aspects of, in the beginning, the story of the creation in the beginning, and the theonology, how it went from, Uranus and Gaia to Kronos and Rhea, and then to Zeus and Hera, and also like the transitions of the leading powers, that there are generational cycles patterned there. So I'm gonna read like my first general notes with what prompted this idea to be the first episode, because for the future I have this cup here full of little papers of different ideas I had, different things to talk about, different metaphors, things like that I will, at the end of this video, I will draw one from here to be the next episode. So when I think about the Greek mythology, the first thing I think about is generational cycles, and I think of, Kronos and Uranus, and then Kronos and Zeus, how that patterns off, and we'll dive into that a little bit more in this video. I also have a generational cycle from the female aspect as well, the mothers. And what's very fascinating with generational cycles is you can break cycles, but you can also maybe break positive ones and start a more negative cycle as well.
Hey, me editing again. I actually did not at any point in the video get to what I was alluding to about breaking a positive cycle. So I'm just going to quickly talk about it right now. I was referring to Hera because in the case of Gaia and Rhea, they were protecting their children. There is a myth of Hera and Hephaestus, which I will definitely do a different episode on entirely in the future. But she did the opposite of protecting her children, and her relationship with her children was very, very different. And her maternal instinct also very, very different. With Hera, she did actually throw away like Hephaestus when he was born because he was too ugly. So there was more superficialness and less maternal instinct, whereas Gaia and Rhea had a maternal instinct and Hera did not inherit that, which is a difference where instead of repeating the pattern of being very maternal and loving towards all of your children, regardless of their differences, like still like Gaia really loving all of her children, Rhea loving all of her children, and helping them even in further myths, helping her children. Hera does not have that. So she created a new negative thing. But there isn't really any other story in the myths that I can off the top of my head remember at this moment, and maybe in future episodes it might come up, but of the gods really having such a negative response to their own child as Hera had for Hephaestus. So it did not develop into a cycle, but it is something that she did that was different than, was something negative that was different than something positive of those before her.
And there is that kind of shown in the mythology. Power hungriness. This is one of the generational cycles I noticed in general in the mythology, showing a lot of power hungriness, and this theme can also be detrimental in many, many, many other ways in many, many, many other stories in the mythology. So I will definitely touch on it a little bit in this week's episode, and there's definitely going to be an episode kind of dedicated to that power hungriness, that greed, that lust for power that is shown, the negative sides of that. Accepting versus avoiding fate is a very common theme within the generational cycles and within the mythology in general. But there's a lot of avoiding fate, like, you know, having the prophecies of being overthrown and trying to prevent that by trapping or swallowing children. That is a common cycle, which is very interesting when you put it in that order and you see it in that way, like, oh wow, so Kronos swallowed his children to prevent him being overthrown. Actually, Zeus does the same thing, kind of, and we'll get to that later in the video. So like cliffhanger moment there. And then also, like, so that's like the paternal cycles, and then there's also the maternal. So what with like Gaia and Kronos, how Gaia aids Kronos in overthrowing his father, and Rhea and Zeus, how Rhea aids Zeus in overthrowing his father, and this little pattern being shown. Relationships with children in general is a really big cycle, and I actually do have quite a few things in this cup related to relationships with children in the mythology, like the maternal and paternal aspects, because there's a lot going on there. Also, leaving oneness. This is something that I might do like a whole separate video about at one point. As this is the first episode, I'm just starting, and I'm gonna, you know, we're gonna figure it out as we go. But if I look at the mythology backwards, which I have done, I mean, I've read it front and back, and I look at it backwards for Greek mythology, if you think about it, it's like humans then going to the gods and going to the Titans and then going back to Uranus and then Gaia, like that oneness, like going back to oneness. And so the mythology then shows them leaving oneness, and they keep multiplying and they keep growing and keep expanding through, like, you know, when the multiplications of, like, you have the Titans and the Cyclopses and the 100-handed ones, and then from the Titans, then you have, you know, the Olympians, and the Olympians expand to the demigods. It keeps expanding. And if you look at it backwards, it kind of, think of the stories in reverse in a sense. It's like going back to oneness, kind of. So that might be a full, it's hard to explain it now. I'll have to like actually write it out and find all of the examples of it and piece it together, but that's definitely something. I didn't put it in this cup yet as an option because I need to think about that more and have it more thought out. Breaking free from overbearing control is a pattern in the Greek gods' genealogy. It is a breaking free from overpowering control. You think Gaia wanting to break free from Uranus' overbearing control over her, then Kronos having overbearing control over Rhea in regards to the children and swallowing his children, and Zeus kind of being in a way overbearingly controlling, but also Hera too in a way. So there is some something there. Then becoming that which you fear. Also something that I noticed. This is my first initial notes before we actually dive in deeper into this video. So becoming that which you fear. This is very interesting because when I read the story of Kronos overthrowing Uranus, that story versus Kronos swallowing his children and being overthrown, I do see it as two different people. Even though it's, supposed to be the same person, but I really see it as two different people because with Kronos, he overthrows his father because his father is being overbearing and controlling in regards to his mother, and it says, so setting his siblings free. He set his siblings free, he set his mother free, he set the earth free, and he became the ruler of the earth. And he then, in a way, turned into his father by suppressing his children the same way his father suppressed his siblings and himself. He does the same thing. And then Zeus we'll dive into it a little bit more. He kind of turns into that a little bit, specifically in one of his myths. But in a way, he kind of breaks it. It kind of changes with him, but specifically there is like a becoming that which you fear or that which you overthrew as well, and Zeus does have that in one of his myths where he does in a way become like his father, which is showing that when you fear something you manifest it. As the generations go on, there's more power hungriness that keeps growing and less remorse and less regret for actions, which was the next thing I wrote underneath it. Prioritizing control over love. Not very good at all. Not good at all. And this is actually even a common thing now in this day and age where power over love seems to be a common theme in just modern life. So I also wrote that Zeus breaks a few cycles but repeats a lot of them. I think he also changes them, like changes what they mean. Like you can break a cycle by, in a way, changing what it is, but it's still kind of the same thing, and he kind of does that in the sense of Uranus was kind of overbearing to Gaia and trying to keep reproducing, like keep creating new things. Obviously in mythology it's all a metaphor, so if you read it at face value you're like, this is kind of gross, this is weird, what's going on? It's pretty much all metaphorical and symbolic, so it does mean something else, but if we're reading it at face value of what it is, yeah, Uranus, he was trying to keep reproducing, recreating, and Zeus kind of took that. It skipped Kronos. Kronos still created 6 children, even though he was scared that one would overthrow him, so there's something that doesn't add up there. He was scared of the prophecy, that's why he kept swallowing his children, but he kept creating more. So something doesn't add up there. But Zeus, like Uranus, is just going, like he must keep creating new things. If you actually look at it, and I do have like something written down for creativity versus creation, like for in regards to the myth, if you actually think about it, it is just like the creation of new things. It's not necessarily as we think of it from a human mindset, but it is written in a way that it seems very human. And that's the metaphor. That's there's something hidden in plain sight. So I wrote, his children all changed the story in some way in regards to Zeus, even though he does repeat big cycles, such as preventing Metis from having her second child. So that one I want to dive into a little bit later, but Metis was his first wife. So Hera was not his first wife. it was Metis, who was his first wife. And then he had something with the goddess of justice and created more kids. And but Hera was not his first wife. I think she was like his second official wife. I don't think Themis, the goddess of justice, was considered a wife. I will double check that and correct myself.
Hey again, me editing, and yes, I was incorrect. Themis is considered in most myths Zeus's second wife and Hera as his third wife. So Themis was one of the wives after Metis, so he had two Titan wives, and then Hera as his third wife, who he did coerce and kind of trick her into marriage, which was not very nice on his part. He tricked her by playing different tricks as a songbird, and he low-key kind of manipulated her into marrying him, which is not a good cycle that he started, but luckily it did not repeat in the following generations, except it kind of did, because in some myths his sons do coerce women, but not into marriage in the same way as Hera. So he kind of started a cycle in a way that was not very good. And Hera, being the goddess of marriage, being tricked into marriage is very ironic. And in the future, I'll definitely do a full video just about her.
But there was a prophecy in regards to Metis and her children being the ones who would, or specifically her son being the one who would overthrow him. So he swallowed her. And those of you who know the myths kind of know what happens next, but we'll get to that in a second because it's very fascinating how a cycle is broken there. Unhappy marriages as a result of power, hunger, and ego. Gaia, Rhea, and Hera all have that going on. Also Aphrodite has an unhappy marriage, but that's not really due to power, hunger, and ego. That's something else entirely, which we'll talk about in future episodes, of course. Losing battle with the ego, lots of losing battle with the ego. I think I have something in here that just says like everything to do with like the egoic self in mythology, because I will do a full episode at some point about the egoic self in mythology, because it's there. The metaphors are there. Not learning from the past. Yeah, that's a cycle. Not learning from the past, quite literally repeating exactly what happened before. Fear. Yeah. Like fear and trying to change fate. When a prophecy was delivered, trying to change it, and actually the acts to prevent it, except in a way, except in the case of Zeus trying to prevent a prophecy, it kind of blew up in their face. You can't prevent what's supposed to happen. If it's meant to happen, it's going to happen. Postponing what must occur out of fear and making it worse. That's what I just said. Look, past me and present me are thinking alike. So Zeus broke the cycle of trapping his siblings, or did he? So this is very interesting because there is in one of the myth stories where, yes, Kronos set his siblings free, but then in a way he traps them in a different way, like because of his power hungriness, his control. So then because he did trap some of his siblings, particularly he was the Cyclops? The Cyclopses are the siblings of the Titans. Then Zeus freed them, and they were on his side when they had the Titanmancy war that occurred in the myths. So he set his uncles free. So Kronos trapped his siblings. Technically, Zeus does not trap any of his siblings. He does kind of keep all those who disobey him in Tartarus, which includes putting, putting the Titans and some giants and some the 100-handed ones and ones who went against him in Tartarus, and mortals and demigods and whoever went against him. But his actual direct siblings, he technically doesn't trap, but in a way he did trap Hera into marrying him. He did kind of send Hades to the underworld. He sent his siblings far away. He did do things that he's not necessarily considering them, but in a way he broke the cycle of like imprisoning his siblings, which is progress. He didn't entirely repeat what his father did, but he did repeat what his father did in the sense of, again, just like re-trapping like Titans and yeah, different ones. Those who disobey him getting thrown in Tartarus, yeah, that's a cycle that they're just repeating. Blinded by disdain. There's a lot of that. There's actually so much hate in the mythology, but it's not that the mythology is encouraging hate. It actually shows the negative effects of hate. Like, it shows the consequences. If you think of any of the stories, it can show the negative effects of hate. Like, in the case of, is it Selene that was the mother of Dionysius? I believe so, remembering her name exactly, but in her case, she was killed as collateral damage to Hera being hateful. She, knew what would happen if Zeus showed the mortal woman his true form as a god, that she would die as a result. And that's an effect of hate. She's being hateful. It's also an effect of Zeus pushing her over the edge. But it's an effect of hate as one of the examples. That myth in itself has a lot of symbolism that I will not really get to in this episode. Lack of love. There is that. I'm really thinking, when I think about the mythology, are there any actual healthy examples of love? I think the only one who actually might show the healthiest example of love, surprisingly, would be Hades in regards to Persephone, even though he did kidnap her. But there is genuine care there. There really, in the mythology, there is maternal love definitely being shown, but romantic love, I don't. There's a lot of healthy romantic love stories in the myth. And then a family at war, that's a cycle. It's just a family at war. If you think about it, it's just constantly they're at war with themselves. So that being said, let's get to the next section, which is talking about generational curses. So generational curses, the concept of generational curses, is discussed in a lot of different avenues of life. It's discussed culturally, spiritually, psychologically, and many different contexts of how generational cycles can, present themselves to us in our reality. And it refers to the idea that negative patterns, behaviors, or misfortunes can be passed down from one generation to another within a family. Which we all kind of have them. I have them. Everyone kind of has them. They are sometimes disguised as traditions that are just actually negative actions that can cause harm and unforeseen consequences as a result of them. So they can be things that include addiction, poverty, abuse, or even certain beliefs and attitudes. Really, absolutely anything that negatively harms anyone that you inherit from those before you. So, family patterns is how we tend to identify what generational cycles is. So recognizing reoccurring issues in family history, such as substance abuse or unhealthy relationships, or, being egotistical, greed, gluttony, these sorts of things, laziness, crime, whatever it is, family patterns that it's this is the way that we do things, traditions, not all traditions are like that, but some, this is just the way that we do things, and the way that we do things is oftentimes, unfortunately, a lot of the way that we do things mindset, those things cause a lot of harm to people. It's even just how you speak to children, how you handle things, how you do things. It's what you inherit psychologically from those before you because you observed those patterns when you were younger. Also, it can come to there can be generational cycles in regards to spiritual beliefs. So it can be talked about in the sense of spiritual beliefs. So in some traditions, generational curses are believed to be spiritual burdens, which is true. There are a lot of different faiths that do acknowledge, and spirituality in general, that acknowledges that generational cycles are energetic burdens that we carry. And they can be broken through prayer, rituals, or specific actions. honestly, sometimes how I work to break some cycles is I have on one side of my lineage a cycle of lack of compassion. So I try to do something every day where I am acting in compassion. Lack of gratitude is a generational cycle, like just not being grateful, instead just complaining all the time. It's a generational cycle. So I try to do something every day to be grateful. Just trying to change the story. Now, from a psychological perspective, modern psychology frames these as learned behaviors or trauma passed down through generations, which is also true. But it's very interesting when you can then look back and see, well, we kind of have all the same trauma. Like me, my mom, my grandma, we all kind of have the same trauma. What does this, where is it coming from? It's a generational cycle. It passed down through generations, and it can be addressed through therapy, conscious effort, inner work. One big thing with generational cycles is you got to do it within you. So don't try and fix it in those who are still alive, who are older than you. Like, you got to do that work yourself. You can't force anyone to break the cycle. You can do it yourself. So don't try and go back. Once you break it within you, don't try and go back and try and make everybody else fix it in the way that you fixed it. If they weren't able to break the cycle, they weren't able to break the cycle. That is their story, not yours. And that is a really big thing with generational cycles, is you cannot force someone to break it. You can only do what you can do. So in regards to breaking cycles, many people focus on self-awareness, education, seeking help to break the cycles in their family. And these are all great ways. I'll also at the end of this video include affirmations and some journal prompts that can help with breaking cycles. And also then I will talk about the journal prompts at the start of the next episode. So give it like a week, and I also will encourage you to answer those journal prompts when I give them at the end in the comments, and let me know what you think, so it can kind of help you in terms of working on breaking those cycles, changing those patterns, and identifying what ones might be showing up in your life. I think it's really, self-awareness is huge, and acknowledgement in regards to your family, not just being like, well, they're family, they're blood, I have to love them, and so I'm just gonna ignore all of these red flags waving up that these are problems. There's a generational cycle in one side of my family lineage in regards to fear and paranoia, and it is, and like just suspiciousness, and it is a big thing, and being aware of it enough to call it out and identify it within myself and within other people, and know that I'm not going to be repeating that in my life. So self-awareness is huge, and acknowledging the truth, taking off those blinders. So that's basically what generational cycles are. So now that we understand them, let's dive into the myths. So the myth that we are kind of focusing on mainly is the myth of Uranus, Kronos, and Zeus. So that story. What happened there in regards to the generational cycles. So in the beginning, Uranus, it was also known as the sky, and Gaia, the earth, were among the first primordial deities of ancient Greek mythology. So they are the first myth we have. And they had many children, including the Titans, the Cyclopses, and the 100-handed ones. However, Uranus feared his children's power. So I was going to pause on that for a second, because being afraid of your children, acknowledging that maybe you're doing things wrong, that is something that I've experienced in my life. That my father, my estranged father, he was scared of me uncovering the truth, and he was scared of my voice, of my ability to say no, to exercise my free will. Our power is our free will. So what power was Uranus afraid of? Well, he was afraid of his children's free will. Well, what if they decided to overthrow him? Like, power doesn't necessarily mean the power of a titan, the strength of a titan. Uranus was the sky. But is he really afraid of the 100-handed ones? The power is what they represent. The actions they can take to change things, 100-handed ones. The Cyclops is what they can see. Now I don't have it here in my cup, but because I'm still kind of processing how that it will make sense. But the Cyclopses having only one eye related to the third eye, there is something there. There is, and I'm working on it. And once I kind of figure out maybe how, I'll add it to the cup. But what they can see and their inner strength. The Titans having this inner strength, this higher spiritual power, which obviously they end up overthrowing Uranus, and they end up leading and ruling over the earth until Zeus comes and overthrows the Titans. But it's less of their physical strength. Because if you really think about it, what is the sky afraid of them physically doing? It is what they represent. They represent something different. And when someone wants to be controlling, and in the myth with Uranus, he is overbearing and controlling over Gaia and does not let her rest. What power does his children have? His children have the power to defend her. His children have the power to change something, to be different, to change the story. And the thing is, the most narcissistic and controlling people are afraid of those who can break cycles. What Uranus is afraid of is not having power over his children. So he traps them. The amount of family civil war that occurs in the Greek myths that very much is a metaphor of showing these situations and in a way how to deal with them. Because he imprisoned his children, Uranus imprisoned his children within the depths of the earth, within Tartarus. And that caused Gaia pain physically, because shoving giant titans and cyclopses and hundred-handed ones, into the depths of the earth, it's going to cause her some physical pain. But emotionally, as a mother, her children are banished because the father is afraid. So this means for generational cycles, well, he's starting it. He's the starting point. But actually, Gaia and chaos created Uranus. So he's not the first. Chaos was the first. Chaos and Gaia. And then Uranus and Gaia are the ones we talk about the most, but the first was actually chaos. So chaos, being Uranus' father, makes a lot of sense because he's a little suspicious, a little paranoid, and he passes that down through generational cycles, which I can observe in my own family. And I'm sure we can all observe it in ours in some way, that paranoia of the adult figures having paranoia of the younger kids noticing that what they're doing might be wrong and changing things and losing control is what creates a lot of problems in family dynamics and in generational cycles. So Gaia eventually gets fed up and she starts to seek revenge, which is a common theme with the women in the Greek mythology, specifically Gaia, Rhea, and Hera. Rhea not as much, but Hera loves revenge. Her myth, she loves revenge. But her reasoning, I have it in one of these cups, so there'll be a little episode about Hera. Her reasoning, I get it. But it's definitely metaphorical, because the more that you read the myths, you're like, yeah, these are metaphors. Because, there's no way, it would be like when we try to tell kids stories and we're trying to teach them a lesson, and we come up with some fake story that doesn't really make sense, and it's too illogical to even try and poke holes in, but there is a message there, and if you really think about it, there's a moral. That's kind of what the myths feel like. So Gaia seeks revenge, and she convinces her Titan son Kronos to overthrow Uranus. So this is where we have a cycle beginning. Technically, I don't think it's stated in the myths that Uranus overthrew chaos. It's just Gaia created Uranus with chaos and then married him. She selects Kronos, who I will correct myself in the future if I am wrong. I believe he is the youngest. I believe if I remember correctly from the theology and some of the other myths, he is the youngest Titan, which is very funny because his youngest son then overthrows him. So Kronos goes to overthrow Uranus. Kronos ambushes Uranus. Kronos is gonna get, he's gonna in a few years get ambushed by his own son. the element of surprise. To a controlling figure, anything outside of you acting how they want you to act is considered an ambush. And they will make you feel bad for it. So you think of it like, if we break it down to like an actual family where there is a narcissistic controlling person, and one person acts out of character and stops being controlled by that person, then the narcissistic controlling person feels attacked and will lash out on everyone. So, and I'm going to get to that point obviously with Kronos and Zeus, but in a way that's what Kronos does. Because he's ambushed by his son acting out of character, he didn't expect it to happen, and then creates a war. Which is what happens if you stand up to someone in any aspect, not just in a familial aspect, but in any aspect. You stand up to them, they'll fight back. But you have to remember what you are fighting for. So in this case, Kronos is the heroic person who is, ambushing, sneaking up on, acting out of character than what his father would, expect. He is not following the herd. He's not sitting like a sitting duck. He believes firmly that he can be a better ruler than Uranus, which is one of the reasons why he fully takes on the mission to overthrow his father and castrate him and separate him from his mother. So he does it. He gets a sickle and he castrates him. And Uranus's fall marks the end of his rule. So he stopped being king. He was overthrown. Now, he was castrated. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about the symbolic implications of basically his control over Gaia was through the sacral chakra. The sacral chakra is where we house our negative cords of attachment, our fears, our anxieties. The sacral chakra. He was separated from Gaia because Kronos castrated his sacral chakra area. He cut the cord. He quite literally, Kronos went and cut the cord between Gaia and Uranus so Gaia could be free from Uranus. He cut the cord, the first cord cutting. To break free from a controlling person, you gotta cut the cord. Right there. Right there. But Gaia couldn't do it alone. She needed support. And sometimes you need support to cut the cord. And it's okay to need support. And so one beautiful generational cycle, that's a positive cycle, is the leaning on support. There is, in the myths, there is a lot of turning to a figure, a mother figure mainly, but also turning to somebody else for support. That is a good lesson. Because she didn't have the strength to do it on her own, but with support she was able to free herself and become her authentic self. But she allowed herself to be walked over, and she was being controlled for so long that she ended up becoming angry and seeking revenge because she didn't know how else to free herself. And sometimes anger, well, when it's wrathful and it creates war, it's not positive, but sometimes that little feeling of anger can be a little bit positive because it can motivate you enough to cut the cord and free yourself. Which, if there's any pattern that's being shown, it's the freeing yourself as a positive thing. The problem is Kronos doesn't keep the cycle broken. He frees, but then he traps when he gets scared. He forgets what he did, and this isn't often a problem with generational cycles, is we break them. But then sometimes we forget what we did, and when we're in a situation that we don't know how to handle, we just repeat what was done before. Mainly out of fear. So, the myth, then Kronos becomes the new king of the cosmos. But there was a prophecy delivered. And Kronos feared this prophecy, that he would be overthrown by his own child. And it was foretold that he would. Now, he had two options. He could accept it and love his children and maybe have a you know, a nice transition of power, and overthrowing could have meant maybe not something so dramatic, but because he was afraid, he made it happen in such a dramatic way. To prevent the prophecy to be overthrown, just as his own father was overthrown by him, he swallows his children, so he therefore traps his children. In the same way, him and his siblings were trapped due to their father being afraid of them. But after the sixth child was born, Zeus, Rhea had enough. She reached her breaking point, just like Gaia did. She saved her youngest son, Zeus, and tricked Kronos. And the thing is, when someone's so power hungry, they sometimes aren't in the right mind to identify what's really going on. He didn't even stop to think or check that it was a stone. He just swallowed it because he was that afraid and that power hungry that he doomed himself. The negative consequences of fear and being power hungry. Rhea was heartbroken at her 5 previous children being swallowed, not being able to connect with her children. It caused her pain. In the same way that her mother, Gaia, experienced pain when Uranus trapped her children. So she saved one of her children to end the tyranny, which is exactly what Gaia did. And Kronos, being the one to end the tyranny, instead of keeping it that way, he repeated the cycle out of fear. So Zeus was hidden and raised in secret, and eventually he grew up and he confronted Kronos and forced Kronos to disgorge his siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. And then he led a rebellion against the Titans. So a little bit more dramatic than Kronos just castrating his father. This was a whole rebellion, which, like I mentioned, known as the Titanmancy. So Zeus and his siblings eventually, after years, emerged victorious, and then Zeus became the new king of the gods, ruling over Mount Olympus, and the cycle of succession was broken for a time. Now, Zeus feared his children with his first wife, Medes, because there was a prophecy that her child would be the one to overthrow him. So, it specifically stated that Medes would bear 2 children. The first, a daughter, Athena, who would be wise and powerful, and then a son who would be even greater than Zeus and would overthrow him. So to prevent this, Zeus swallowed Medes while she was pregnant with Athena. Later, Athena sprang fully grown and armored from Zeus's forehead. But the prophesied son was never born, so Zeus's rule remained secure. Now, what I find fascinating, so fascinating about this myth and about the prophecy is, I live in Greece, so I know the capital of Greece is Athens, and Athens prospers. Athens, named after Athena. Millions of people yearly will come just to visit her temple, her historic temple. In a way, like there is a temple of Zeus below, near the Zapion, but the temple of Athena is where everyone wants to go. Or the Parthenon, the Acropolis, that's where they want to go. In a way, it came true because Athens, whose patron god during the ancient times was Athena, is the ruler of Greece. So, from that perspective, in a way, somehow, which the myths kind of all happen a little bit out of order, and then you kind of have to piece it together on a timeline. So whichever myth came out, who knows, like what was first? Was it the myth of Athena being the patron? Like how it all kind of happened and sprung around. But even back then, they wouldn't have known like the significant power that Athens would have had, especially since Athens was not always the capital of Greece. So it's very fascinating to me from that perspective that in a way, it did happen in a sense that Athena became the more powerful than Zeus in that way, her symbolism, what she left behind, because the myth of Athena, like her myth, her character changes as Athens does, and it is thought to be that she symbolically represents the spirit of Athens, and as the values and things changed within Athens during ancient times, then what she represented started to get altered, which is fascinating. What's also fascinating is Athena does, in a way, break the cycle because she vows to never get married. So she makes a vow to never get married or have children. So she kind of ends that line of that cycle where it ends with her. It ends with her. So she did that. And I want to do a full video on Athena because she was always my favorite. And her story, her myth is so fascinating. So actually what's also fascinating is Zeus prevented a prophecy. He did succeed in preventing a prophecy, in a way. But he had a lot of other prophecies made about him and about his children. But from that specific line, he did, in a way, prevent it. Not that he broke the cycle, but after that prophecy didn't happen, he just kind of stopped caring. And he never tried to swallow his children again. He never tried to, trap his children. He gave them equal powers in different ways. Like, they had different things that they were in charge of, different things that they did. Hermes being the messenger of the gods, Ares being the god of war, the Dionysius being the god of, like, wine and theater. Like, he didn't suppress his children. He had that first attempt, and then after Athena emerged from him, and the second child never came to be, he stopped caring. Which in a way, broke a cycle. In a way. But he still did repeat it, but he kind of learned, and then he stopped being afraid. So he stopped being afraid of being overthrown. I guess because there was no other prophecy about him being overthrown. But it's very fascinating that it was the son that was never born that would be the one to overthrow him. But actually Athena and her legacy in Greece and ancient art and in general, like Athena holds so much power. And Athens in itself, like, not only is it Greece, people from all over the world come. So Athena left her mark, in a way, more so than Zeus. So it kind of happened, but in a very different way. Which, fascinating. So this myth, all of the myths that I mentioned, because they're all separate myths, they're not like told as one myth. They reflect the theme in Greek mythology of fathers fearing their children's power and trying to prevent being overthrown. A cycle that began with Uranus, continued with Kronos, and nearly repeated itself with Zeus, but did not. So, what is being showcased here? We're kind of reviewing these myths. So what I was able to identify 4 primary cycles. So first, a cycle of fear and overthrow. So Uranus feared his children's power and tried to suppress them, leading to him being overthrown by his son Kronos. Kronos repeated this pattern, fearing his own children, swallowing them to prevent being overthrown. Despite his efforts, he was eventually overthrown by his son Zeus. Also, he kept creating children. So it's kind of like he wanted it to happen. It's kind of like he was kind of asking for it in a way. Like, he kept swallowing them, but he kept creating them, which is a very interesting choice. Zeus also faced a prophecy that a child would overthrow him, so he tried to prevent it by swallowing Medes. However, the cycle was broken when Athena was born from his head, and Zeus was not overthrown. Because Athena was not prophesied to overthrow him, and she never did attempt to overthrow him. She's more level-headed. She got all the brain. She is the goddess of battle strategy, the intellectual, strategic part of war, where her counterpart is Ares, who is like just running in full force into battle, and she is like the wise. She's the goddess of wisdom, and her mother was the goddess of wisdom before her. So Zeus was afraid of the children of wisdom, was afraid of intellect, of the mind, and it actually is, when someone wants to be in control, they're afraid of the unpredictability of others. So the next one is cycle of suppression and rebellion, which is each generation of gods tried to suppress the next, leading to rebellion and eventual overthrow. And it reflects a cycle of mistrust and conflict between generations. And there is so many aspects of the mythology, a family at war, of like mistrust, but eventually they start to heal that. Like there are myths of Helios, who is a titan, who does help Demeter when she's looking for her daughter who was kidnapped by Hades. You know, there is eventually reaching some sort of meeting ground where they, in a way, exist harmoniously, but then there's like a whole bunch of titans and hundred-handed ones and demigods and gods who, you know, disobeyed Zeus, who are living in Tartarus, and he kind of repeats that in a sense with what Uranus did, but at least it's not his children. So it kind of, or his siblings, exactly. He just made one of his siblings rule over that domain. But it is a very interesting cycle of a symbol to show, because family dynamics and Greeks in general were family oriented. So a lot of things, like it's mainly family dynamics being showcased like in symbolism of what happens with the generational cycles, what's going on in family dynamics, what happens as a result of this dynamic and that dynamic. Very important lessons and very true to the culture. And the myths do reflect the culture of the time as well and what those metaphors are. And what's also very interesting is children, we are more family oriented. So one thing my mom told me when I was little, like to get me to do things, she would say, well, you gotta put this back, it has to go with its family, it has to go with its home, because we're more family oriented. So the reason they're all kind of family in mythology is because as children we're family oriented, as adults we're also family oriented in general as people, and then the culture of Greece is more family oriented. So making them all related makes it more relatable to understand because it's family dynamics. But it's just all metaphors. Not that it was actual real people who were all related and all like a bunch of messed up stuff going on. It's symbolism, symbolizing different dynamics. And some of the myths, some of the stories, it's just a little bit different, like how Kronos feels like a different person, and the first myth of him overthrowing Uranus versus the second. It's change of character, how you can evolve, how you can change, how you grow, what they represent. They represent different aspects of us and different aspects of us as we grow and as we connect with other people. So the third cycle is the cycle of prophecy and fate. The fear of prophecy drove each generation's actions. Uranus, Kronos, and Zeus all acted out of fear of what was foretold. But their attempts to avoid fate often led to its fulfillment. In a way, and it did. I just talked about, in a way with Athena, it did. Because not many people are going to the temple of Zeus, but a lot of them are going to the Parthenon. Even though, like, it's completely different, it's a myth, but I do find that fascinating. That is just like a little epiphany I had when I was studying the mythology, and be like, oh my goodness, it kind of did happen, but it kind of didn't, and Zeus stopped being afraid, and we love that for him. He stopped being afraid, he just started acting out in different ways, and he has a lot of other myths that also he seems like a very different they all really seem contradictory, which there's reasons for that. There's like the myths like blending together because there was the Mycenaeans and the Minoans who had their different myths, and then when like they came together and there was like the fusion of different myths and different stories, so the contradictions, like there is like reasons regionally for why that would happen. Different regions had different myths, had different deities that they connected more to, but there were like the general myths, and especially in the theology and the Titanmancy and all of those things that are just like the general things. But the contradictions are there in a way. It also just proves to the point that they are symbols and metaphors, what they represent. And so if you take the archetype of Zeus and you put him in different situations, he might act a little bit differently. That's a little contradictory, but shows the complexity of humans and of our souls. It's very fascinating. So fourth and final, the cycle of power and control. So the myths show a repeating pattern with those in power who go to great lengths to maintain control, often through harmful or destructive means, only to be replaced by the next generation. Which happens, like then the next generation after the gods, the demigods, and then the mortals, and then you just like kind of the mythology goes away. In a way, like it stops being as relevant. But to be overthrown by the next generation, like to try everything to prevent the inevitable, which is change. And there is a big fear of change, and that I would say, in general, the cycle is fear of change. So the myths illustrate how unaddressed fears, attempts to control the future, and lack of trust can create repeating cycles across generations. The stories also hint at the possibility of breaking these cycles. Zeus's story does end differently, suggesting that awareness and different choices can lead to change. So here's what I will end this with. So here are the affirmations that, so we understand that that's the story. So in conclusion, the big lesson is you can break the cycle, but you have to overcome the fear of change. So here are affirmations to help with breaking cycles. 1, I'm aware of the patterns in my family, and I have the power to create change. 2, I honor my ancestors' experiences while choosing a new path for myself. 3, I'm not defined by the past, I am free to shape my own future. 4, with each conscious choice, I break old cycles and create healthier ones. 5, I forgive myself and my family for past mistakes and I move forward with compassion. And 6, I am the author of my story and I choose growth and healing. And I will put these affirmations in the description so you can repeat them and put them in your routine. Now there are 7 different journal prompts that I will put in the description. I will just read them out loud. And they'll be in the description, and then I will answer them myself at the start of the next episode. So what reoccurring patterns or curses do I notice in my family or personal history? How have they affected me? So 1. 2, how do the stories of Uranus, Kronos, and Zeus relate to my own experiences with family cycles or generational patterns? 3, what is one cycle I'm committed to breaking? What steps can I take to start this process? 4, in what ways can I reclaim my power and make different choices than those who came before me? 5, how can I practice forgiveness toward myself and my family as I work to create change? 6, what kind of legacy do I want to leave for future generations? How can I embody that vision today? 7, who or what supports me as I work to break generational cycles? How can I strengthen these supports? Those are the questions. They will be in the description so you can reference them. Feel free to answer them in the comments and I will discuss them at the start of the next episode. So now to finally conclude this episode, what is next week's episode gonna be? Let's pull from the cup. Let's see, I feel like I have like at least 50 different options in here, so we're gonna see. This is what we pulled out. Okay. Interesting, we're talking about Zeus because one of his children will be next week. 12 labors of awakening. Hercules' story and how his 12 labors reflect the awakening journey. And also, in a way, I might try and make it work for the 12 chakras too. Let's find out what that's going to be next week. I will see you guys next week. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode and the first episode of this new show. I appreciate your support and let me know in the comments what other myths you want to see as well. And I will say goodbye for now and see you in the next one so we can keep awakening with supports of the messages from the ancient ones.